Hello everyone and welcome to STEM School. In today's video we'll be carrying on with the algebra topic and looking at solving quadratic equations. We'll be going through plenty of examples and exam questions so you guys are best prepared, and yes, please do remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. So let's get started. Now in this video we're going to be looking at solving quadratic equations from the factorising method. So just as a reminder, a quadratic expression is something like this form. Okay, we have ax squared plus or minus bx plus or minus c. So the highest power of x is the x squared term here. Now this is an expression as we don't have an equal sign, and we're dealing with quadratic equation. So to get an equation you just have to add an equal sign. And what we want to do is to solve to find x. Okay, solve to find x. And there are three methods to solve these, and I'll do a separate video for each method, so check those videos out, okay? The idea is that if the factorising method doesn't work, then you'll do the quadratic formula, okay? Now, there are some questions that specifically ask for completing the square method, so that's most likely when you'll have to use that. And before I go over this method of factorising, I want to point out that when you solve quadratic equations, you'll tend to get two answers for x, okay? So that's maybe a little bit strange to hear, okay? So I'll illustrate this with an example. If we had x squared is equal to 36, okay? And you want to solve this, all you have to do is to take the square root, okay? So take the square root of both sides and you'll get root 36. Now you know that 6 times 6 is equal to 36, so the answer for x is equal to 6, right? But here we have two values of x, because the other answer of x is equal to minus 6, okay? Because if we have minus 6 multiplied by minus 6, you get 36, because two negatives multiplied by each other is equal to 36. So that's sort of the mentality going into this. Alright, so how do we solve quadratic equations by factorising? So this is the easiest and simplest method to solve these. It's essentially your go-to method. So if this method doesn't work, you'll then try the quadratic formula method. Alright, so firstly what you want to do is to rearrange the equation so that it's equal to 0. And once you've done that, you're able to factorise the equation into double bracket form, okay? So you can check out my previous video on how to do that, more clarity on that. So you'll have double brackets, right? Each of these brackets represents a separate linear equation, right? And what you want to do is to solve each of these two equations to find the two values of x. Now it's easier to understand what I just said with examples, of course, right? So let's try this one. We have x squared minus x minus 12 is equal to 0. So it's already equal to 0, so we don't have to rearrange the equation, right? What we can now move on to is factorising the equation, okay? So all you have to do, first step is set up the double brackets like this, okay? And always remember to put the equal 0 on the end there as we're dealing with an equation, okay? So look at the first term, we have an x squared, so it's nice and easy. We can just put x at the start of the brackets because x times x is equal to x squared. We don't have a number in front of it, that's a bit harder, right? So the next step is to look at the number on the end there. We have minus 12. What pair of numbers multiply each other to make 12? That's what you need to ask yourself. So we have 2 times 6, we also have 3 times 4, okay? Now for each pair of numbers, you have to, which pair of numbers add to make the x term here. So we have a minus 1, okay? So if I do plus 3 minus 4, I'll get minus 1, okay? So that's how you decide which pair of numbers you're going to pick. So it'll be 3 and 4 in the brackets here, okay? So now to judge the sign convention, it's just trial and error, okay, for testing positive or negative. So if I do x times positive 3, okay, then I'll have positive 3x. Then if I do take away 4x, I'll get minus 1x, okay? So that's how you figure out the sign convention. Now the last step, right? So we have two brackets multiplying each other equal to 0, okay? So one of these brackets has to equal 0, right? So what you have to do is just do something like this. So you'll do x take away 4 is equal to 0, and then you'll do x plus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, so you've set up two linear equations, and you just have to solve each of these to find the two values of x, okay? So if we have a minus 4 on one side, you do plus 4 to both sides of the equation, so the final answer for this one will be x is equal to 4. Now for this one, it will just be x is equal to minus 3. So those are the two values of x that we've solved. Alright, so let's have a go at the second question then. We have x squared minus 11x plus 24 is equal to 0. So we don't need to rearrange this as it already is equal to 0. So let's move on to factorising it. All you have to do is to set up the double brackets like this. Okay, and remember the equals 0. So for factorising into double brackets, right? So you look at the first term as x squared. So there's no number in front of it, so it's going to be a nice and easy x at the front of each bracket. Now what you want to do is look at the final number. We have a positive 24. So which pair of numbers multiply to make 24? So just write a list like this. So it'll be 2 times 12. You can do 3 times 8. You can also do 4 times 6. Okay, these pair of numbers multiply to make 24. So to figure out which pair of numbers that we're after, all you have to do is ask yourself which of these numbers add up to make the minus 11 on the x term. Okay, so if I do minus 3 take away 8, I'll get minus 11. Okay, so this is a pair of numbers that I'm after. So I can just put the numbers in like this, so 3 and 8. Now just evaluate through trial and error the sign convention. So if I do x times, so I've got a minus 11x, so I'm going to do a minus 8x because it's kind of close to it, right? So I'm just using that judgment to work it out. So I'll do minus 8x and I'll do a minus 3, okay? So that's how you'll finalise the factorisation. Now the final step is to work out the values of x, okay? So these brackets multiplied to each other equals 0. So one of these brackets equals 0, but all you have to do is to take out the equations so that equals 0. Okay, so do something like this. You'll do x take away 3 is equal to 0. So you can work that out as x is equal to 3. Just rearrange the equation, alright? Then the second equation, we have x take away 8 is equal to 0. So the final answer for x will also be x is equal to 8. Okay, so we have two values of x there. Okay, so it's as simple as that, right? So let's have a go at the final question, right? So we have 2x squared plus 7x minus 15 is equal to 0. So this is a little bit harder because we have a 2 in front of the x squared term. We've got a number in front, okay? So same as before, let's factorise this. It's already equal to 0, so we don't need to rearrange it. So let's set up the double brackets like this. Remember to put equal 0. Now, as we have a number in front, just ask yourself which pair of numbers multiply to make the 2x squared. So it's a 2, so it's quite easy. It'll just be 2 times 1, okay? So we put 2x here and then x here, okay? Now, similar to before, just ask yourself which pair of numbers multiply to make 15, okay? So this is quite easy, as it will just be 3 times 5. That's the only pair of numbers that we can have, okay? But as we have a 2 in front of the x squared, it's not as simple as just putting a 5 and 3 in any bracket, okay? We need to figure out which one it should go into. So we have, it's just through trial and error, we have a 2x at the start here. So if I do 2x times positive 5, I'll get positive 10x. Then I'll have to take away to get 7x, right? And luckily I have a 3, so if I do minus 3, okay, so what you can do is just work out as normal, multiply the brackets out. 2x times positive 5, 10x, then we have minus 3, so we'll get 10x take away 3x and you'll get 7x, okay? So that's how you figure out the factorisation for that. Now, similar to before, we set up the linear equations for each of the brackets. We have 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, so let's rearrange the equation. We have 2x is equal to 3, okay? Then divide to both sides. So we have 3 over 2, okay? so x is equal to 1.5. Okay, so that's one of the answers for x. Let's do the second bracket. We have x plus 5 is equal to 0. Okay, so rearrange it. So you do minus 5 both sides, so that'll be x is equal to minus 5 is the final answer. Okay, so I wanted to show you this last example. Just as I said before, if factorising doesn't work, you'll use a quadratic formula, okay? So let's practically have a go at it. So we have this equation, and I've told you that it doesn't factorise, but let's prove it. So we have x squared minus 6x minus 81 is equal to 0, okay? So when you see this for the first time, you won't know that it doesn't factorise. You'll still try to factorise it anyway, okay? So set up as normal. So we'll have x here and x there, you have equals 0, okay? So what pair of numbers multiply to make 81? So that'll just be 9 times 9, okay? That's the only pair that you can have, okay? So usually the next step is to ask yourself which pair of numbers add to make the minus 6 the x term, okay? But as you can see, these numbers don't add up in any way, plus or minus, to make minus 6, okay? So we know this doesn't factorise. And when you figure this part out, you'll just then have to use a quadratic formula to figure it out, okay? Okay everyone, so that's everything you need to know about the factorising method for solving quadratic equations. Join me in my next video as we look at the quadratic formula. Okay, so if this video has helped you, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.